15 tips that'll improve your photography. Here we go. I'm going to start with something everyone thinks they want to hear, but no one actually wants to hear. Use the camera you already have. Every mainstream DSLR and mirrorless made within the last 10 years is amazing. You'll take better pictures if you master the camera you've already got rather than replacing it with something else. Now you'd think that people would like hearing that. Your camera is good. But what people like hearing even more is your camera sucks. Because then they can argue with someone and they can rally their team members who use the same camera, and it builds this group camaraderie. So I hate to break the news, but the camera that you've already got is amazing. Spending your time researching new cameras, arguing about brands, it will not improve your photography. If you're not taking the photos that you want, it's because you're setting the camera incorrectly, or you need to put more time into the creative side of things. And that's the key. Use the camera that you've already got and learn how to set everything correctly. Number 2, on the creative side of the equation, let's talk about light. Different mood, right? The light in your photo is never neutral. It always says something. Harsh light, harsh emotions. Gentle light, gentle emotions. What you should always be doing is thinking about the light, and also thinking about how it matches or doesn't match the emotions of your subject. It's the grand unified theory of photography. When the light and the subject have unified emotions, your photography will be grand. Was that too much? It is true though. Here's a technical tip. Don't overexpose the highlights in your photo. That sounds like it goes without saying, but what I mean is that if you have the choice between overexposing the highlights and underexposing the shadows, it's much better to underexpose the shadows. Because dark shadows you can actually recover surprisingly well. Blown out highlights are just gone forever. And that's perfectly fine if it's something like the sun in your photo, where you don't really need any highlight detail, but the rest of the time you've got to be really careful about them. Actually base the rest of your exposure around preserving the highlights. If you really want to improve your photography, you cannot just be on autopilot. You've got to put thought into your photos. And that's both sides of the equation, technical and creative. With your feet to the fire, is every single camera setting correct? And the same goes for composition. Is there anything at all that you can still improve? These are not quick questions to answer. That's why one of my biggest recommendations is to slow things down. Maybe you can't if you're doing something like sports photography, but there's a direct relationship between taking your time to get everything right and taking better pictures. Okay, what about using a tripod? When is that going to be a good idea? Well, I would say if your subject isn't moving, almost always. Even if your subject is moving, you should still weigh the benefits of a tripod before you leave it at home. And this is not just about image quality either, although you will definitely get better image quality when you use a tripod. It's also about, previous tip, taking your time. You have a much better starting point to work from when your camera is on a tripod. You can set one composition and then change minor things about it without a problem. Personally, 9 times out of 10, I would pick an entry-level DSLR with a tripod over the best camera on the market without one. Next up, when is the best time to use a flash? Maybe when it's dark, or you're doing some clever studio lighting, or maybe when you're in the back row of a concert. That one's wrong. I would argue that the best time to use a flash, especially the built-in flash on your camera, is on a bright sunny day. It's called fill flash. What it does is get rid of those harsh shadows. I use it a lot in macro photography because it's very common for the subject to have some dark shadows on it. And then fill flash is also really, really helpful for outdoor portrait photography. So just because it's sunny outside does not mean that you should put your flash away. A lot of times, it's actually the exact opposite. Okay, this is something that I run into a lot as a landscape photographer. The scene in front of me is amazing, and I get so wrapped up in it that I just don't pay attention to anything else. So this next tip has really helped me out many, many times. Look behind you. Not right now, I mean, unless you feel a creeping sense that someone's watching you. I'm talking about when you're out taking pictures. I was in the middle of taking these photos when I realized that there was a rainbow behind me. I ran to a spot that I'd scouted out earlier and I managed to take this landscape photo. Definitely would have missed this if I hadn't turned around. A landscape photo is nice. So is a bird photo or a portrait photo. But are any of them really successful on their own? The best photos aren't just nice, they tell a story. So which one sounds more interesting to you? A photo taken of sand dunes on a nice day, or the same composition as a sandstorm approaches and turns everything into a crazy nightmare? That's why you should capture your subject doing something, even something minor like showing a slight smile or jumping over a puddle. Or for landscape photographers, try to capture your scene telling a story, like the sandstorm example, or an amazing cloud overhead. Either way, photography is all about the story. Keep that in mind. Here's another tip about camera gear. Keep the front of your lens clean. It's very basic, but it's also genuinely weird how often I see photographers who have just the dirtiest possible front element. And in the same category as a dirty lens is a low quality filter. They will really damage your image quality. Geez, this sounds like an advertisement for a filter company. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I just want you to improve your photography. Personally, I never use any UV filter or clear filter at all, except in cases where I also need protective eyewear for whatever I'm photographing. I used to use a cheap UV filter when I was starting out, and I ruined a couple of good photos that way, so don't make the same mistake. Number 10, move your feet, because sitting too long is bad for you. Also, this applies to photography. When you're out taking pictures, a lot of people's first instinct is to set up the tripod, set up the camera, or just hold the camera up to your eye and take a picture. But you can do way better than that. You've got to move around. Stand back from your subject, get up close. Move the camera from eye level to like knee level. Seriously, you'll get better pictures if you find the perfect position for your camera and then match the tripod to that position, not the other way around. Once you've taken the photo, you still have work to do. It's not as fancy as everything else, but editing your pictures is a big deal. It helps you guide your viewer's eye through the photo and also capture the right emotions. And it's really easy to overdo post-processing. I highly recommend being subtle about it. But if that's not your style, at least make sure that none of your edits are permanent. Save as rather than save your photos. Or better yet, do your post-processing in non-destructive software like Capture One or Lightroom. That way, you're storing all your edits in a separate file rather than baking them onto the image. One of the most important parts of becoming a better photographer is to organize and back up your photos with a good system. You don't own your photos. Chaos owns your photos. The moment that you turn your back, the universe will conspire to delete every picture that you've ever taken. Here's a test. Do any of your photos have the same file name, number one? And if your house burns down, God forbid, would you lose all your photos? The answer to both of those questions should be no, of course not, are you crazy? Unfortunately, that's not the answer that I hear most of the time. And that's really one of the biggest differences that I see between professional and amateur photographers, how they deal with their data. Every photographer out there has some weak points. Doesn't matter how good you are, there's always something that you can improve. And that's a good thing. But you've got to avoid working around your weak points. Instead, barrel straight through them. Couple examples. If you're trying to wrap your head around camera settings, you should never fall back and use automatic mode. Or if you just can't make the light from your flash look natural, don't chicken out and take all your portraits next to a window. Instead, put the time into learning what you don't understand. It's not always easy, but you won't learn anything if all you do is work around your weak points. Next up, look back through your old photos. If you just watched the previous tip and you couldn't come up with any weak points, here's a really good spot to find them. Because everyone takes some photos that they don't like. On average, why do your unsuccessful photos not work? Is it exposure, focus, composition? Whatever it is, that's useful information. Also, going through your old photos is great just because you'll find some good ones that you totally overlooked earlier. I didn't notice this photo the first time around, and now it's one that I really like. Every single photographer that I know has the exact same story. The big, gigantic secret of photography is practice. Practice the things you don't understand, and practice the things that you do. That's how you get better at anything, not just photography. So close out of YouTube. Geez, the algorithm's gonna kill this video if I say that. Leave YouTube running in the background. Go outside, take some pictures. Sure, keep these tips in mind, they're very good, but fundamentally, that is how you're gonna improve your photography.